You're watching Power Nation.
Hey guys, welcome to the shop. And it's getting a little crowded in here. We got Project Red Sled over here taking up floor space. The bodywork is coming along great. Over here we got the Firebird hanging on the rotisserie, or what's left of it anyway, and it's awaiting its fate. But now we're rolling in a whole new project. Call us gluttons for punishment. The 64 Comet here has been screaming one word to us since the day it rolled in here: altered. Tire smoke, wheel stands, and a driver with a gallon of adrenaline in his veins slamming 4 gears are hallmarks of a time in drag racing history that'll never be seen again. Based off of production models, the AFX cars were factory experiments in how far you could push the limits. For better weight transfer off the line, the rear axle was moved forward and the front end was raised. To achieve this nose-high stance, a straight axle was mounted under the front. With the biggest motor they could find and nerves of steel, these cars paved the way for what are now top fuel funny cars. The heyday of AFX cars is gone, but certainly not forgotten. And we're going to build a tribute to these pioneers in muscle car history with our own axle-twisting drag car, Project Altered Ego. On most of our projects, saving and organizing parts is the name of the game. But with this one, we don't really need to keep a whole lot other than the body panels. We're not even going to use the interior parts and trim, so it makes blowing this thing apart a whole lot faster and easier, knowing we're not going to have to reuse every little piece. The last piece to come out is the rear end. Now we have several options for replacing it. We might go with a 9-inch, we might go with a quick change, we might even go with a completely custom fabbed rear end. At this point, we're really not sure what we're going to do. But one thing I am sure of, this thing's ready to get sent off and get blasted, and that means I've got time to get some primer on Red Sled's fenders and doors. Well, Firebird is on its way back to year 1, where the team of experts are going to take care of some of that extensive rust repair. And that means that we can keep rolling on some of our other projects, which brings us back to the Comet. It's back from the blaster and looking pretty good. But before we start chopping it up, we need to get some primer on it to keep it from rusting. All right, now granted, a lot of this car is going to get chopped up, but open metal is like a sponge, and we don't want it soaking anything up. A good coat of DP sealer, and we won't have to worry about anything bubbling up later. Well, it's time to start sectioning out the back end. Now, neither one of us has ever built an AFX car, so odds are we're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. But hey, that's why they call it a learning curve, not a learning line. So we're just going to jump in and basically see what happens. But before we start making cuts, we need to back off a little bit and make sure that all of our cuts are going to be where they need to be. Ready?
Let's do it.
All right, man. Besides, it's going to clear that line right there and make sure that we're not going to clip or get too tight into this body line.
18's right there.
Yeah. Coming in behind here, I have no idea why they did that.
Right here, it's actually not a full box, just a U.
Just take all that sheet metal off the top of it.
Cool. Let's make some marks and get some fresh blades, man. Start cutting the sucker up. The idea is to move the rear wheels as far forward as possible to maximize weight transfer. Now, there are some sections you don't want to chop up, like the wheel arches. There's a section. So our cuts need to stay away from the body lines. We're measuring out 18 inches on the floor to match what we're taking out of the quarters. With cutting weapons in hand, we're ready to attack. I know this looks a little intimidating, but as long as you got a plan and you just take it one step at a time, eventually all this stuff will fall back together. Or at least we hope. But for now, we got this big old chunk of metal cut out of the car. And I think this front section here, it's going to be easier to just chop it off and build all new sheet metal. Once we got it out and got a little bit better look at it, there's just hardly anything left of it. So first thing we're going to do is cut this off. After that, we'll get these brackets here trimmed off, and then it'll be down to figuring out how to get these little tiny tubs to fit them big old meats.
Watch feet.
Now, normally I'd use one of can-cut spot weld cutters, but with this much rust, you can't tell where the welds are, so an air chisel's the answer. Well, we got our rear tub section here all cleaned up, but before we can shove it back under the car, we need to widen out these tubs to get that big old chunk of rubber underneath there. You know, we were hoping we'd luck out and we wouldn't have to move these frame rails in. It doesn't look like today is going to be our lucky day. We're going to have to tub this in here probably a good couple inches. So, I don't know, Brent, what do you think is a good game plan here?
Probably should cut this thing out first. Do away with these brackets.
So knock some brackets loose. I know we ain't going to be able to use these either. These are coming right into the tire, so we can get rid of this. Get the tub out of there, knock those off of there, and then what, tack it back in place and see where we're at?
Let's do it.
Before the air chisel and saw have a chance to cool off, they're back at work, cutting out all the parts that are gonna do nothing but just get in our way. Now once the fat's trimmed off, it's time for a test fit.
Looks good.
We're up against it over here on this side.
Yeah, we'll trim it off.
Well, let's get a saw or something and cut those out of the way then, huh?
Yeah.
Push it up in there and get tacked in place. With a little more trimming, it fell right in place. And next is lining up the rockers and burning up some welding wire. All right, let's check our measurement side to side here. We've got 7 3/4. 7 3/4. Dude, we are dead nuts.
I shall weld it.
The side to side measurements look good, so we can stitch it back together. Ow. Ow. Since we kept our cut lines level, we ended up with a clean butt weld, almost the entire length of the wheel wells. When we laid out our initial cuts, we measured for an optimistic 18 inches, but because of wheel well interference, well, we ended up with 16. That left us with a 2-inch gap that needs to be filled. While Brent's been working on the other side, I've been doing essentially the same thing over here. Now somehow I managed to get stuck with a bent up rusted side, but that's all right, we'll get it taken care of. The next thing I got to do though is get this outside piece here patched in to get some support back into the side. Then I can start on the inner structure, and once that's done, I can come back out here and start patching in this outside again. I've got a patch already cut, and I'm marking where the roll needs to start. I'm leaving it long because it's easier to weld it in place and trim it to length afterwards. The slip roller is the easy way to get the curve you need, but if you don't have one, you can bend it around a piece of pipe, an old drive shaft, or your neighbor's head if he still hasn't returned your lawnmower from last summer. Even with the slip roller, some good old-fashioned hand forming still comes in handy. You know, oddly enough, the shape of a 64 Comet is the same shape as my leg. Now once the shape is just right, it can fill in that big old hole. Now that I've got the big piece in to maintain the shape, I can start patching in the smaller areas. I've still got a few little holes left in here, but I'll come back later on with some silicone bronze and get those little buggers filled in. What I can do right now is get this patch put in, and once I get my body line straight, I can come back and start patching in the rest of the sheet metal. Brent's just about got all the rust repaired on the other side, and I just have one more little spot right here to take care of. Once I get this patch here welded in, we can attack that center section and make room for those big tubs. Those of you on the West Coast, well, you guys can get pretty spoiled, but the rest of us know what it's like to spend days on end cutting out rust, making patches and welding them in. When you're dealing with cars that have survived 40+ winters of salty roads, it's something you just got to do. While I've been putting sheet metal in, Brent's been cutting sheet metal out. You may wonder why we put the center section in just to turn around and chop it back out again. Well, the answer, tubs. The outer section of the wheel wells need to be in their final spot in order for our measurements to be correct.
Looky there.
With the chunk back on the floor, Brent's marking out 4 inches right down the center. That'll give us the 2 inches we need on each side to make room for the new wheels and tires. And yeah, that means more cutting. With the excess trimmed away, all that's left is some grinding, and it can be fused back together. Since we cut out the tunnel to make room for the tubs, we've got to make a new one. Besides, it gives Brent a chance to show off his mad metalworking skills. Once he's got it roughed in with a hammer, the English wheel smooths it out. Brent made it bigger than necessary, that way he can trim it for a perfect fit. Yet more tin chopped out of the center section, and he can finish welding it all together. Today we're working on our 64 Comet AFX car. I just about got the side trim holes here filled in, and Brent's finishing up the tubs. Now when it's done, this car will be the first car ever on the entire power block to hang the wheels out on the track and on the street. But there's a lot of stuff that's got to happen between now and then. With the rear section back under the car, 2-inch strips are being added to each side to make room for the massive drag tires. Now once the tubs are welded in, some braces are added to keep it all in place. Now the factory frame rails ended up here, which was fine for the 220 horse that this thing originally came with, but to stand up to the abuse that we're going to be dishing out, we need to tie the entire chassis together. Now of course it's going to be getting a full roll cage, but we're also going to take 2x4 box tubing, lay them into this front frame rail and tie them into the back. But before we can do that, we got to get some of the sheet metal out of the way. Now the plasma cutter is a great tool, but you got to remember it basically liquefies metal and everything else in its way. Yeah, including hidden seam sealer.
That was hot.
Let me get some gloves. Safety first. One more time. Now I feel indestructible. Once the old rails are cleaned up, I'll cut off the ends so we can lay the new rails in. Before we start making anything, some planning's in order.
Like where it comes back here, because we got the 2x4. We can take the tubing right there. We got 2 inches in there.
Yeah. This one here is shallow.
On this end here, we can slice this and pinch that in to match it. Now we just basically just have to figure out the angle and put a little bit of a Z in it. Yeah, once we get the Z, then we can pie cut it, take that piece and raise it up and slide it into that one.
Give it a shot.
Now since the front and the rear frame rails aren't in alignment, we're going to have to Z our new center section here. And we've laid the whole thing out on cardboard so we can see exactly where our cuts are going to be. Now the key to getting this thing to line back up is going to be the distance between those cuts. So before I do anything, I'm going to lay it out on the steel. Whatever your total angle is, the cuts will be half of that. So, since our total angle is 45 degrees, I'm setting the saw to 22.5. This one is ready, so while I'm cutting the pieces for the other side, Brent's going to start getting this one put together. He's beveling the edges with a grinder to give the welds more area to fill. since the old front rails are shallower than the back, I'm going to have to modify the new ones to match. Now I could just notch it and weld it, but a right angle cut would leave a weak spot. So I'm going to create a gradual taper by using a pie cut along the side and reattaching the top. And after a little bit of cleanup, they drop right into place. The factory rails were only about 1/8 of an inch wider, so C-clamps pulled it all together. And once we got them fit, we melted them into place. And now that we got the center part of our frame here tied together, we can start designing our roll cage. Now first thing we're going to do is come in here with some 1/8 inch plate on each side. Then from there, we'll come across with some 2x4 box tubing. Now that'll give us a good strong place to attach the front part of our roll cage to. Now in the back here, we're going to do the same thing, some 1/8 inch plate with some 2x4 box tubing, and that'll give us a good strong anchoring point to come in with our main hoop. There's a few different ways you could strengthen the attaching points, but this car probably won't be the fastest thing on the track. So rather than use 1/4 inch plate or maybe some box tubing, we're going to keep the weight down by reinforcing the rockers with 1/8 inch plate. The important thing is that you don't butt weld the braces directly to the rockers, because if you ever flip it on its lid, well, the body could tear right off the cage. To make the front braces, I'm using the same technique as I did for the center rails, slicing out a pie cut and using clamps and a welder to give it that gradual taper. To keep the frame as strong as possible, I'm cutting a notch in the original rail for the new one to slide into. Now when you're building a one-off car, you're going to end up with a lot of one-off parts. Now since our factory frame rails are actually sitting lower than our rockers, our new braces ended up with a pretty mean contour. Now once we've got these welded in, we're going to start laying out a roll cage. Stick around. Hey, welcome back. Ian here had some pity on us and he came down to help us lay out the roll cage in our Comet. So it looks like a pretty cool program you got going here.
Yeah, I've got hooked on it, I use it all the time. It's BendTech Pro. Once you got the die locations programmed in, which we just did on this piece of 1 3/4 tubing, this will be real simple to use. With some easy measurements, we'll be hooped up in no time.
So what's step one here?
All right, we'll start. We're just gonna make a simple hoop, main hoop, start with. We'll just be coming off the floor, over across the roof and down. So the first thing we need to know is how wide we need that hoop to be, how wide it has to be at the top, and how tall it has to be, and the program will just give us bend locations for the tubing.
Okay, what if we want to come in, because we want to come up on the quarter panels and kick it in a little bit.
We'll just pick an offset hoop, or double bevel hoop, like that.
Ah.
And we're gonna work on outside dimensions only on here.
There you go. Yeah.
Makes life simpler. We've got the tooling already programmed in. I need to know height from the floor to where you want it to go in, the height from where you want it to go into the roof, width at the roof of the narrowed version, and then the width of the floor.
Gotcha.
All right, the number one question we need to know right away is, we're not building like for an NH or actual spec class, right? We're just building just a cool cage.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about rule, but we got to worry about it being safe.
Yeah. Right.
So the nice thing about this is we'll try to tuck the cage up nice and high into here and keep it up there. So the first measurement we got to do is we got to go all the way across the bottom on the floor here.
Did you go outside to outside?
Well, where the computer program set up to take an outside dimension, so that'd be 55 inches. I would go 54. That'll give you ½ an inch on your side to get a welder around on the inside. So we'll call the bottom measurement 54. Now, Rick, you wanted to go up and then in right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just go up and measure to the point where you want to start going in.
24 inches.
So it's 24 inches to the bend, and then measure straight up to the ceiling. Put 39 to the roof, Brent, and then let's just go across the top. 47 inches. That'd be pretty good. Start across the floor, Brent.
Floor would be 54 inches.
Okay, across the roof.
47 inches.
Height from to the first bend.
24 inches.
And the total height to the roof.
Be 39 inches.
All right, so we're gonna cut it at 93 1/16, and I'll just give you those are the locations of the bends, and those are the angles. cut it, throw it in, bend it.
Sweet.
Then we'll see if it worked. We'll either have a hoop or a piece of scrap.
With all our measurements taken and bends figured out, it's time to start making the hoop. We're using 1 3/4 inch tubing and cutting it to length on the cold saw.
Okay,
All right, what do we do?
put an X on that end up there, because that's the end that all your bends have to be pulled from, just so you remember it. Okay, mark that thing at 7 3/8. Okay, next mark is at 17 7/8, 61 3/4. And then the last one is 78 3/4.
We need to bend to 13 degrees here, but Ian suggested taking it up to 17 because it's gonna spring back some.
Looking for the second mark. Okay. Stand back and make sure that it's like in line. Okay, stop. That's going to be 45, 65, 70. Ideally, what you want is you want this piece right now and this piece to be almost at a 90. Come all the way out to the next mark. Okay, there's the next mark. Okay, don't release it. And what we'll do is we'll measure across. Yeah, so we're gonna throw a couple more degrees on that. We're gonna take that a little bit further. Okay, stop. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're good on that. Go right in front of that floor one you got there. That one we're gonna have to trim down. What you'll have to do is, it's still a little sprung. Just throw a ratchet strap on it and suck it in a little bit. So pull it out, trim it, get it in, tack it, and then I'll loan you my computer and you can start on the door bars. And if you got any problems, come get me next door.
Cool.
Beauty, guys.
We'll probably come get you in a little bit.
All right, man.
Once we get the excess trimmed off, it fits just right. Now, like Ian said, it sprung out a little wider than we want, but the ratchet strap will suck it in just enough for us to tack it in place. Well, we did pretty good on these door bars. The first one is in and looking killer, and the second one is bent and ready to go. It's got to go down through the dash, so Brent's going to get the hole cut, and then we can get it set in there and see how it looks. If I followed Ian's directions, this thing should slide right in place. Cool, perfect. I'm gonna notch it to fit the main hoop, so I'm marking the length of the bar and the angle of the cut, then trimming off the excess. The tubing notcher makes it pretty easy. Just clamp the tubing in, check your angle, and you're set. I'll clean up the edges with a grinder, then we'll see how it fits. The notch was right on. We can tack it in place and move on to building the rest of the cage. Hey, not bad for a couple of guys that never done this kind of thing before. All right, we did get some help, but sometimes you need to know when to ask for advice. Today we're going to be taking a break from our other cars and getting back on our 64 Comet drag car, Project Altered Ego. Now, it doesn't matter how much tin you chop up or how many bars you put in, it doesn't mean anything without a drivetrain, and that's what today's show is all about. Now, we got something cool and different to fill in the engine compartment in this thing. We'll get to that later. One thing I can tell you, it's going to take up a lot more space than this Comet here has to offer, and that means more of this factory tin is going to have to find its way into the scrap heap. Some of you guys might be crying watching me chop up these virgin shock towers, but it's a necessary evil because we need to save the fender mounting surfaces to get the sheet metal hung back in place. Back in the 60s, when these cars were getting cut to pieces and raced, guys would hack out the shock towers, leaving the edges, and head to the strip. but we're not that hacked, so we're going to drill out the spot welds and get rid of the leftovers. After warming up the grinder and smoothing off the frame rails, she'll be as smooth as eggs. It's time to see how much of this newfound underhood real estate the motor's going to take up. Plus, we need to get our motor mounts fabbed up and get our headers fabbed up, and we need to see if we're going to have to chop up our firewall. Now, the real engine that's going to go in this is going to be a highly modified Cobra motor, but for now we're using a mock-up engine just because it's lighter and a lot easier to handle. Plus, we don't have to worry about banging up the real one. All right, cool. How we look?
I think we'll be okay.
We may even have to lose that center cross member. The one that we worked so hard to tie into our frame.
Yeah, but we can raise it. It's no big deal.
We still got a steering column.
Ooh,
Yeah,
steering
columns. Well, I was thinking about that on the brake. What if we use like a street rod style that has the lever where you actually pushing on the pedal and it pushes that lever in behind it, you know what I mean? And mount it crossways behind the firewall, because then we'll have tons of room for the head.
Yeah, that'll work.
On the side. And out here, since we chopped all this out, we could actually take the clutch, mount the clutch out here, outboard of the steering column. It'll be a little bit weird with the pedal over on the other side, but then we'll have room for the headers to come out the side. We'll have clearance for our steering column.
Well, since we have so many holes that need to be filled, why don't we just cut the firewall off?
You want to drop the whole firewall out? You love making work for us, don't you? Need to mock up some motor mounts on this thing, but we need to decide on height-wise where we're going to put it. The stacks are going to come up. They're not real tall stacks. They're probably 6 inches or so. Something like that. Decide on the height, how much the floor, or how tall of a hump we want in the floor, and then mock up our mounts just to kind of set it in there. If we run the master cylinder sideways behind the dash, we don't have to worry about clearance on the head, so we could basically put this thing wherever we want it.
We don't want to get it up too high because then our mount will be in the way for our steering column, yeah. Probably get the motor mounts in, get our suspension hung, and then go from there.
If we could do that and set the axle right there, that'd be just about centered on that spring. That'd set the whole engine behind the front axle. That'd be a wheel standing son of a gun.
Yeah, it would.
I think our biggest issue is going to be clearancing for the transmission. That thing's huge.
Yeah, we'll make room.
Yeah, that's right. That's why God invented plasma cutters. To avoid catching the foam mock-up motor on fire, we're covering it up with a welding blanket. It's a thick material treated with a flame retardant. Since we're probably replacing the whole firewall later, I'm just getting enough of the Comet out of the way to make room for the motor and tranny. With the motor set where we want it, we can make some mounts. Brent's starting with the plates that attach to the motor. With these in place, you can make the extensions that connect it all to the frame rails. With one mount tacked in place,
Let's get it.
we need to make sure the engine's level. A slight tweak of the engine hoist and everything looks good, so the other side can be tacked in. One final measurement to make sure the setback is equal on both sides, and it can all be finished up. With the motor mounts in, we can get our transmission set in place and get a cross member built. Now obviously this isn't the motor that's going to stay in Altered Ego, and here it is. It started life as a Ford 4.6 liter, but it's been sleeved and bored out to a full 5 liters. It has billet racing cams, oversized valves and seats, CNC ported heads, and it's all topped off with a throttle body intake. And here's the man behind the motor, the mod god himself, Sean Hyland. How you doing, man?
Good, Rick. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So how is it that you know so much about these motors?
Well, we've been working on them a long time.
Well, about how long?
Basically, we've been working on these engines pretty much exclusively since '95. And we've developed them for, road racing, drag racing. We've been privileged to work with a lot of the people that were pioneers racing these, like John Mahovitz. First guy to drag race one of these engines in the 9s, the 8s, the 7s, and then the 6s.
And you built all those motors?
We've worked with John. We built some, and we've also developed components with him. We've also worked with some semi-factory backed race teams. people like Multimatic that ran Grand Am Cup. We were involved in the development of these engines for GT3. So a lot of opportunities around the world working with these engines for the last 12 or 13 years.
So you literally know these things inside and out.
Yeah, I sleep with them at night.
Nice. Well, I sure appreciate your help on our project here. Well, can you tell us anything about the short block?
Absolutely. This is a Ford production block we're using on this build-up. It's the best one they made, called the Texid block. Unfortunately, it was only used till '99. So for higher horsepower applications, we actually have our own casting, a full race block that we offer now. But for this one, this is good to over 1,000 horsepower the way it sits.
No kidding.
And same thing, the crankshaft, production forged steel crankshaft. We've used these crankshafts up to 1,500 horsepower, no problem.
Well, what kind of power are you getting out of your aftermarket blocks?
The aftermarket block is good to 2,500.
Holy smoke. So what head castings do you start with?
These are 0304 Cobra castings, one of the better late model castings. And then they're CNC ported with our own port design. That removes the human variability. If the head porter had a fight with his wife the night before, we don't have to worry about it. And then we fit them with our stainless valves, our valve springs, retainers, locks, and our own camshaft profile, which are ground onto billet cores.
So you actually designed the profile of the cams then?
Yeah, we've got about 8 different profiles depending on the application.
Oh, wow. So the rods and pistons, are those just straight off a shelf, or what are those?
Those are actually our design. We had to work with companies like Manley for the rods, JE for the pistons, ARP for the studs years ago when we started working on these engines, because at the time, none of these parts existed, so they're all to our specs.
Well, this doesn't look like any standard small block Ford that I've seen.
No, these engines all have 6 main bolts on them, 4 down this way and 2 side bolts on each cap. So we have to torque all of them in sequence to get everything lined up the way it needs to be. First, the main bolts in the 4 pattern, and then we have to use an inch-pound torque wrench to tighten the side bolts correctly. You know, Rick, one of the tricks with putting these engines together, we put the ARP moly lube on the bolt, but we tighten the bolt to torque, which is 55 foot-pounds, 3 times and loosen it off. That gets rid of any residual friction between the bolt thread and the connecting rod, so that when we torque the bolt for the final time, we get the correct amount of preload on the bolt.
Gotcha. So put it in?
You bet.
Wow. Looks like you're ready for the head gaskets. What's up with these?
This is a multi-lam gasket. It's made of all metal materials laminated together, and it's held in place with a rivet until it gets set in the engine. These type of gaskets are really durable. There's no composition material, so there's nothing to blow out. They'll stand up to nitrous, supercharged, whatever you want to throw at it.
So they're more better.
Mo better.
Cool. The heads are where the real power is made. Sean spent his career perfecting the engineering behind these power plants. And that's why we can expect to get such big power out of such small displacement. Once the heads are torqued to 75 foot-pounds, the timing components can go on. Now, I've built a lot of domestic V8s, but seeing what looks like 20 feet of timing chain, man, I'm glad Sean is the one putting this thing together. 4 cams means it's not only 4 times as complicated, it's also 4 times as critical to get it right. Man, you've been busy over here. Which got set up?
This is the setup for degreeing in the cams. We have the degree wheel on the front of the engine, dial indicator on the cylinder head, and we're going to degree in the cams. Degreeing the camshafts on the double overhead cam 4.6 Ford engine is super important. If you don't do it properly, you're going to flat leave 30 to 40 horsepower on the table.
That's a lot. So what's the first step?
Rotating the engine until we see 50 thou valve lift, we record the valve opening point on the degree wheel. We then do the same on the closing point and adjust the camshafts as necessary.
Well, we snuck down here to Horsepower's dyno room and we commandeered the joint. We're going to do our best to twist the shaft off this thing. What do you think the odds are, Sean?
I think the dyno will probably survive.
All right, this little mod motor did good. 491 horsepower at 6,800 RPMs, 415 foot-pounds of torque at 5,900.
It's about what we expected.
It's a nice little motor.
Thank you.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Looks like Altered Ego's gonna have plenty of power to hang the front wheels.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. I really appreciate it. Hey, thank you for coming down and helping us out with the project.
My pleasure, Rick.
Hey, Sean Hyland Motorsports, if you want the best of the best to build an engine, look him up. Brent's back at the Comet mocking up the rear end. We need to get the springs ordered, but first things first. The axles need to be underneath it so we can set the right height and make our measurements. We decided on a Currie 9-inch with 430 gears, a Detroit locker, and 31 spline axles. In a lightweight car like the Comet, this will be more than enough. Now for a rarity in our shop, drum brakes. Why? Because four-wheel disc brakes on an AFX car, man, that'd be as out of place as a nun at the bunny ranch. Remember, we want to keep the old school vibe with this one, and the drums, well, they're part of it. The front axles need to be converted to a disc brake setup, so Brent starts by pressing the bearing adapters onto the spindles. Wait, disc brakes? Yeah, we want to go old school, but we also have to drive the thing, and we're not crazy. The spindles are mounted onto our Super Bell straight front axle with a kingpin to hold it all together. Next come the caliper mounting brackets and steering arms. The center link ties the east and west ends together. Since this whole axle will be coming apart later for ceramic plating, the bearings can go in dry for now. Nothing fancy here, just basic GM-style calipers will do the trick. Now for the fun part, seeing if all our measurements come together. If the tires bolt on and fit in the wheel wells, we know we got it right. The Hyland wheels and Firestone dragsters from Coker Tire are straight out of the 60s, and they fit like a dream, so it's on to the front.
Hey, Brent, you got any sandpaper over here?
Sure do, man. I tell you what, I'll give you a sheet of sandpaper, but you gotta help me get this thing up under here.
All right, even though it's not much of an axle, I guess that'll work.
Well, it's a little bit different. Let's see what we can do, man. All right.
Hey, man, we gotta get these boxes forward.
Where's our grip mic at? Hey, Mike. Hey. Hey, you put these boxes up under here, man? Yeah. All right, man. Appreciate it, dude. Your sandpaper's over there, but you only get one sheet.
All right, that'll work. Thanks, man.
The only thing Brent needs to do here is get the axle in position so we know the length and arc when we order our springs. This week we're working on our 64 Comet AFX drag car, Altered Ego. Now last week Brent got the axles mocked up and got our ride height set. Now all we need to do is build our rear frame rails and measure for our springs. These frame rails are in the right position, but they're coming up a little short. So that means we've got to stretch them out. Once we get what's left of the floor trimmed out and cleaned up, we can plan out the back half. Hey, man, guess you got a game plan?
Yeah, I think so. We're gonna take our 2x3, come out here. We're going to put a pie cut in it to let it bend back so we can go straight back. We're gonna take us another piece right here, go across the back, and then we're just gonna take some pieces right here, tie it into the back. Thought about even just bolting it right here.
So actually save all of this sheet metal here?
Yeah, all this will be just untouched pretty much. We're just gonna have two pieces come back, catch it right here. So it's its own frame. So then what we can do is add a cross member. We can drop our fuel cell here. The tube will come back off the cage, come through here, tie it in about where our spring perch is.
Cool, that'll work.
Let's do it to it, man.
After allowing for 8 inches of the new rails to extend into the old ones, they come out to exactly 4 feet. In order to keep the frame rails parallel, I'm making an 1/8 inch pie cut so I can get the right bend. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this, but leverage can be your best friend. Oh man, how you getting it in there?
I'm gonna need a big old hammer, man.
Way ahead of you. Once the rails are in place, Brent needs to check to make sure it's square. It's easier to double check yourself now than to cut the welds apart and correct it later. These will get welded together out of the car, so Brent's just tacking them to keep the correct angle on the rails. Before he makes any welds, he'll clamp it down and square it up to keep everything in place. These plates, well, they're not just there for looks. They'll help strengthen the entire rear structure. Got it. We got our rails welded in and we double checked the location of our front and rear axles. Now back in the day, AFX cars used parallel leaf springs front and rear. Well, to keep Altered Ego true to its heritage, we're going to use the same setup. Now, if you've never set up leaf springs before, well, it's a little more complicated than you might think, but it all starts off with a basic set of measurements. Ready to go?
Let's do it.
We know a typical length for rear springs is 55 inches. So if we go 24 inches to the front, the mount will go right here.
There's 24 right there.
We also need to note the distance from the frame to the ground.
16 inches.
16 even?
Mm-hmm.
We'll mark the approximate location of the rear mount 31 inches back from the axle. We'll also need the distance from the rear mount to the ground.
23 inches.
For ride height, we'll measure from the bottom of the axle to the ground.
Be 13 1/8.
And from the top of the axle to the frame.
It's 9 inches.
All of these measurements are going to determine the arc of the springs. Now the springs need to be as close to parallel as possible, and that means that the mounts need to be the same distance apart from side to side. The back end looks pretty good, and that means we can move on to the front. The front spring needs to be a minimum of 40 inches centered over to the axle. So with the axle set where we want it, we'll measure forward 20 inches for the front perch.
And I put this way out here.
Great out in thin air.
Yeah.
Right on. Oh, we can always extend the frame rail out. Bring it out and get a perch out there.
Probably just cut it out right here. Slide a piece in.
Plug weld it from the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work. That would work. The only problem there is our bumper comes in. Well, actually, we could extend that out and move a bumper out to clear it. We might have a little bit of a gap to the front, but at least we wouldn't have to chop up that nice new bumper.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
We'll also measure the distance from the front perch to the ground.
21 1/4.
Measuring 20 inches back from the axle, the rear mount will be right here, which looks pretty good. And we'll note the distance from the mount to the ground.
17 1/4.
For ride height, we'll measure from the bottom of the axle to the floor
8 3/8.
and the top of the axle to the frame.
10 1/4.
Now with these in hand, I can call the manufacturer and get the springs on order. Now we're going to wait to make any mounts until we actually have the springs here, because since these are being built from scratch, we don't know what the final dimensions are going to be until we actually have them. Hey guys, we're back with our 64 Comet. We're just going to cut the rest of the firewall out of the way, because honestly there's not enough left of this thing to even mess with. So it's time to bust out the plasma cutter. Originally, well, I didn't want to replace the whole firewall, but as we cut more and more out to make room for modifications, it's become more of a hindrance than a help. So I'm going to let the sparks fly. The fenders are coming off for easier access because we have a lot of welds to remove. I'm using a Matco spot weld drill, and Brent prefers the old school drill bit method. Once the welds are gone, the air chisel comes in to clean up the cling-ons. A little hammer and dolly work will straighten out the edges. I'm knocking out 2 jobs in 1 pass here, smoothing off what remains of the spot welds and knocking off the surface rust with a strip and clean disc. Some weld-through primer will seal it all up. Okay, now here's a quick tip for you guys. When you're using this weld-through primer, don't ever set it down like that, because all the solids drop down to the bottom and jams up your straw. It ruins a brand new can. Always put your lid back on it set it upside down, save you a lot of money. With the rest of the firewall out of the way, now's a good time to add another bar to the cage. We can get at it a lot easier, plus we can weld it all the way around. I'm chopping up a piece of leftover roll bar tubing I found in the scrap pile. We always hang on to extra pieces. Hey, you never know when you'll get the chance to use them. And we all know recycling is good. The tube sharp makes it easy to get the fish mouth we need for the joint, but you could do this with a grinder and a lot of patience. All right, man, let's see how close we got here. The fit looks good, so we're ready to draw some amps and weld it in place. Using the cowl as a guide, the shape of the new firewall is traced onto some cardboard and trimmed out for the template. Cool, that looks good. I need some extra material around the edge for a mounting lip, so I'm laying a strip of 3/4 inch tape to get that extra width. The outside mark shows me where to cut. The inside mark, that'll show me where to bend. I'm cutting the rough shape out with the plasma cutter first to make it easier to handle, since there's no way a 4x8 sheet's gonna fit on a bandsaw. I need to clearance the corners so I can make the bends for the mounting edge. The straight sides, well, they can be easily bent on the brake, but the curved edge has to be formed by hand. By lightly scoring it with the grinder, I'm creating a line where the metal will easily bend. Since I want to keep the face of it flat, I'm going to make some relief cuts. A hammer and dolly are all that's needed to get the flange finished up. The fit looks good, but we do need to do a little more chopping to make room for the bell housing. It fits like a glove, so we can go ahead and weld it in. Now before we can go any farther, we need to get the transmission bolted up to the back end of our mock-up motor. That way we can build our transmission crossmember and fab up our tunnel. You ever look inside of a Pro Stock car and wonder why the tunnel's so big? Well, this is why. Moving the engine and transmission up and back, well, it may be great for weight transfer, but it doesn't leave you a whole lot of room on the interior. Now we could do like Extreme, just cover it up with a rubber mat.
Bam! Money! Dollar bills.
But that's just not our style. That means we need to get some sheet metal over the top of this thing, but still leave enough room for our feet and our pedals. But before we can do that, we got to build a transmission crossmember. Brent, you got a plan, man?
Check out that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What you gonna do with it?
I figure bore a hole right there, weld it in, have a piece of tubing across, make a little mount right here off the tubing.
Cool, that'll work. You're on it, and I'm out. We're using removable mounts from Ballistic Fabrication. If we ever need to drop out the trans, well, taking out the crossmember won't be an issue. Brent's getting on the recycling bandwagon and using another piece of scrap tubing from the pile. The inner diameter of the tubing is the same as the outer diameter of the connectors, so they go together like peanut butter and jelly. With the ends welded up, it's time to cut the center. A few more passes with the TIG and it's ready to go in. The last piece of this puzzle is the actual mount. Brent's tacking it together in the car, but since this piece is made to be removable, he can take it out and finish the welding on the table. Now eventually we need to build a floor all the way to the back and tie it into what's left of the original. But first things first, we need to build toe boards, and that means, you guessed it, templates. I already cut a piece of cardboard to roughly the size I need. After marking where the first crease is going to be, I can set the clearance for the transmission tunnel. After some trimming, I'm ready to transfer the pattern to some steel. The shear can chop off the extra material, and the plasma, that'll give me the clearance I need for the roll bar. A quick visit to the brake, and she's ready for a test fit. Now, panel's looking pretty good, but looks can be deceiving, because from the factory, they actually had a stepped floorboard to make clearance for the pedals. And that means we're going to have to cut up a brand new floorboard and follow that contour. Now, there are fancier ways to get this done, like using a hammer and a shop bag and finishing out the shape with the English wheel. But hey, we're keeping it old school with the cut and paste method, cutting out the pieces and stitching them together. A hole punch is a big time saver, but it does have drawbacks. Hey, the jaw is only 3/4 of an inch deep, but that's why we have cordless drills. Just make sure to drill into a piece of wood and don't ram the bit into the floor. With the cut and paste out of the way, I can finish out the floorboards by making room for the roll bar. Ah, perfect.
That's pretty cool, man. Get some floors in here finally.
Yeah, it's getting there. I can't weld them in yet, though, because I don't know what seats are going to go in it. So I got to put bracing and stuff in. I got a cool idea, though, I'm working on. So we can still do the tunnel, though. Got any ideas?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking maybe a hex tunnel. Just bring it back to like right here. But you know, we still got to put a draw shaft hook in it somewhere.
Yeah, I'd like to put one front and rear. Actually, I'm going to have to drive this thing.
Yeah, I heard that.
And just keep it round in the center.
Yeah.
So cool, that'll work. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it, man.
We don't own stock at a paper mill, but we should with as much cardboard as we go through around here. If you're having trouble finding sheets large enough, we'll go down and make friends with the guys in the loading dock at your local grocery store. It's often used for wrapping and padding pallets. After marking where the bends will be, a straight edge helps get the shape needed.
All right.
The shifter hole can be cut out now while it's still flat, so it's time to make a few sparks. A series of 45-degree bends will form the hex shape of the tunnel. With the tunnel in place, Brent can mark what needs to be trimmed out of the firewall and toe boards. A couple more marks and the rest can be trimmed to match. Hey, we're back, and I just got back from O'Reilly picking up the last few pieces we need to get the suspension mounted up underneath Altered Ego here. Now, Eaton Detroit Springs hooked us up with these custom-made springs using the measurements that we gave them. So that means it's time to get the Comet back on all fours.
Got what we need for the mounts, man. You got the rest?
See, I got it. Cool, let's build something.
Let's do it.
We're mounting the springs loosely to the axle first, using U-bolts and some shock mounts left over from the Firebird. We won't weld the spring pads to the axle until the chassis mock-up is almost complete. We're rolling the axle into the car so we can figure out where it needs to sit for the tires to clear. Once we get it in the right spot, we'll know where the front perches need to be. With original style springs, well, you can use original mounts, but these springs, like so many other parts on the Comet, well, they're not exactly original, so we're going to make our own perches. Brent's starting with a chunk of 4x4 square stock we had to sneak down to extreme to find. It's almost the right width for the springs, but like everything else on this ride, some modifications are in order. These need to be strong enough to hold a lot of power, but light enough to not add a ton of weight. Once the right width is achieved, the piece is boxed in for strength and to give us something to weld to the frame rail. With the front perches built, they can be tacked into place to check tire clearance one last time.
It's like 1.5 inches. Yeah, it's about right.
We're within about a 32nd of an inch. Actually, it's not even 1/8 of an inch. It's probably closer than the factory ever had it.
Lay it in like that.
Okay, so we got 83 to center eyelet, 83. Dead nuts.
Let's weld her up, man.
With everything checked and triple checked, the springs are pulled out and the pockets are finished welded in place. Once they have a chance to cool, the assembly is bolted back in so we can lay out the rear perches. We want them angled slightly forward so when the springs compress, the shackles swing back without binding. Adding sleeves will keep the rails from collapsing when we cinch down the bolts. So Matco's hole saw and a drill with a fresh battery will give us the clearance we need. With everything in place, we can check our work.
Hey, lower it down, Rick.
Ready? Tell me when.
Hey, whoa. It's sitting already.
Ooh, that's not good. Apparently we should have had the weight on the springs when we measured for the shackles, huh?
Yeah.
Oops, what do you think?
Probably should just take that shackle loose and just go ahead and lower it on down and we'll see how far it goes. We'll just pop another hole.
With so many 4-link coilover cars roaming around the shop, well, it's easy to forget little details about setting up leaf spring cars, like having weight on them to set up the rear shackles. We'll end up with an extra set of holes, but since these are sleeved, well, we're not really losing any strength in the frame rails, so it's all good. Now here's a little tip that can save you some frustration. If you can't get bushings to slide in place, a shot of WD-40 works wonders.
Yeah, looks like it's gonna work.
Oh, dude, that's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Right on, man. Beautiful. Good job. Since we rolled the 64 Comet into the shop, you've seen it go from an average grocery getter to an altered wheelbase, in-your-face AFX car.
Today we're taking Alter Ego a few steps closer to the track by installing the shocks and finishing up the roll cage.
We robbed these plates off of Project Street Fighter, and as you can see, they've already got shock mounts on them. The only problem with using them is that it's going to set our shock way too high, plus the location could actually interfere with our headers. By mounting them on top of the axle, it's going to lower the height of our shock tower, plus it's going to give our headers a lot more clearance. Since we're trying to mount straight edge tabs onto a curved axle, I've got some trimming to do. When cutting a piece this small, you need a push block if you want to keep your fingers attached to your hand. A small piece of scrap metal does the trick here.
Always be sure to keep your fingers clear.
For the shock to be most effective, it needs to be mounted perpendicular to the ground. Any variance in the angle will decrease its effectiveness. Now you may have noticed that when we're tack welding stuff, we usually don't wear a helmet. Well, we do get emails about it, so I figured I'd take just a second and explain to you why we do it the way we do. Now, there's a lot of lights involved in making TV, and they're bright enough that it makes the sensors think you're welding even when you're not, and that makes the lens dark all the time. In the real world, you should always wear a helmet. With the south end attached, I got to figure out where the north end is going to go. You need to design the height of the bracket with the shock in mid-travel to make sure it stays in its operating range. Otherwise, you could end up with damage. A simple cardboard template gives me a rough idea that I can transfer to steel to make the upper mount. Yeah, that'll work. Now this mount is going to take some abuse, and failure is not an option, so I'm using a chunk of 2x4 box tubing. I'm pre-drilling some holes for the plug welds. It'll be perimeter welded, but plug welds will give it some extra strength. Once it cools down, the shock can be test fitted. When tightening the shock, cinch it down until the bushing is the same diameter as the washer.
While Rick's fabbing up some brackets for the other side, I'm going to get started on the rear shocks. We're reusing these old plates off the Firebird, but this one's bent just a little, so before I get started, I got to make a repair. I'm using a torch to heat up the bracket so it'll be easier to bend. After letting it cool, the lower shock bolt can go on. Just like the front, the shocks need to be at 90 degrees to the ground. I'm using standard shock bolts, but with some modification. Instead of bolting them to a bracket, they will be welded to a plate, which will be attached to the frame rail.
We're back with Altered Ego, and we pretty much have the roll cage here all laid out. There's a lot of different ways you can do this depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish.
A cage for a round track style vehicle is strongest around the driver, with both ends designed to crush in on impact.
But a straight line car like ours, well, this thing has to be rigid from front all the way to the back. That'll give you more predictable handling and let the suspension do its job.
We already measured, cut, bent, and notched our tubing, so we're ready to move on. With our main cage already installed in the car, we can start by building off the front and back. Our front tube is going to attach to the A-pillar bar, run through the firewall, and attach to the front frame rail. This will help by stiffening the frame and keep the suspension from moving around.
Now, some styles of cages incorporate crush zones. These are areas that use smaller diameter tubing and bends engineered for controlled failure. That way, if the car ever goes into the wall, the cage will absorb the impact and not the driver. Altered Ego, well, it's using a rigid cage all the way through, and that means no crush zones. You should never weld roll cage tubes straight to sheet metal. It has very little strength and the bar is likely to just rip off. So we're welding on a plate to reinforce the area before the tube goes in. And with the front frame rails tied into the rest of the cage, it's time to stiffen up the driver's compartment. The side rail, it actually forms the lower part of a cube that surrounds the driver. Plus, it's going to help eliminate this weak point in the factory chassis. Now, diagonal bars, well, they do help stiffen up the chassis, but their main purpose is to protect the driver. Now, the door bar and the seat bar, well, those are going to have to wait until we actually get our seats built and mounted. We're checking placement of the side rails now before we weld them in. We want them to be as low as possible so we're not tripping over them when we get in the car, but they also need to clear the floor. Something to note when designing your own cage, all sanctioning bodies require this bar to be one piece.
The rear bars are a lot like the ones we installed up front. They tie the main cage to the frame rails, stabilizing the suspension. We'll also be installing an X-bar. This ties the left rail and right rail together, helping to equalize the torsional load. We designed these so they attach right over the leaf spring mount. This will transfer the energy from the leaf springs into the cage more effectively.
Well, that's about all we can do until we get our seats mounted. Now keep in mind, Altered Ego is not being built for any one particular class. And if you're building your own cage, you're going to have to do a little research before you start chopping up any tubes. Check with the sanctioning body for the class that you want to run in to make sure you're meeting all the requirements.
Yeah, because there's 1,000 different style cages for 1,000 different style vehicles out there. So make sure that your design will work with what you're trying to accomplish. Alter Ego's coming along slowly but surely. And today we're going to try our hand at some aluminum sculpting and fab up some custom race seats.
But that's not the only aluminum that's getting loaded up in the Comet today. We got a fuel cell to get mounted up in this thing, and since I don't want to end up in a fiery ball of death, I want the safest fuel system possible. So we'll show you how Aeromotive is going to give me one less thing to worry about when I stab the throttle. Alter Ego started life as a plain old 64 Comet, but we've altered the wheelbase, stiffened it up, welded in a roll cage, and swapped out the steering and suspension to turn it into an old school AFX drag car. Aeromotive sent us this prototype of the new fuel cell. Now the really cool thing about it is that it uses an in-tank sump box, an electric fuel pump, and fuel filter. Now Aeromotive's fuel pumps are the most versatile on the market. These will run either a carbureted daily driven engine or even a high horsepower EFI setup. All you have to do is swap out the regulator and you're good to go. Now the sump box means that there's always fuel by the pickup, so you never have to worry about vapor lock or pump failure. And this whole system is available as a weld-in unit, so you can retrofit almost any tank, whether it's a stock or a custom. We got all our measurements and decided how to place the tank, so Tommy's cutting the pieces for the mount. The main thing to keep in mind when mounting a tank is placing it so that in case of a collision, it won't be punctured or torn loose by its own weight. One nice thing about Aeromotive's tank is that it can be mounted in any direction because there's no rear sump and all the lines feed in through the top. This means the same tank will work for a drag car or a road race car. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Oh. We're using nuts as spacers to get the frame away from the tank so it'll be easier to weld. Square this dude up. About 29 1/8. 39 1/8. Dead nuts. Once everything is true and square, we can tack it together and mount it in the car. With the mount tacked in, it's time for one last test fit. Make sure everything clears here. We got clearance to the bars. We think. Once I weld it, it's there.
Think that dog a hunt?
Right on.
Get out the way.
Yeah, dude, it's hot. Now for another ounce of prevention, don't forget the safety straps. We'll get the fuel lines and the pressure regulator installed once we finish out the tin work around the tank. And that means we can move on to fabbing up our seats. When it came time to choose seats for Alter Ego, we could have just ordered up a set and been done with it. But hey, where's the fun in that? Besides, this is no mail order hot rod, so we're gonna build our own.
Aluminum is the standard material used for race seats, so we went ahead and got a sheet of 14 gauge ready to go.
So I went online, pulled up some images to help us come up with a plan.
Like those, we don't really have a way to do rivets though. It's kind of bulky there though.
Well, I like the higher bolsters on it though, because it helps hold you in a little bit. What I don't like about this one though is the back. Like that, it has too much of a modern kind of a look to it, you know?
Right?
This one I like, if we raise the bolsters a little bit, to give you a little bit more support on the side, but I like the shape of the back of it. So I was thinking maybe do something along those lines. What do you think about the holes though?
Too many. That's way too many.
Get rid of them or reduce the number?
Get rid of some of them. Keep a few. Maybe even change up. I like this other side. It's got different sizes to it. I like that look.
Well, what about, you mentioned to me before you had an idea about doing like a reinforcement around the outside of it.
Yeah, we could put up some of the holes around here to help dress up the side.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Let's get started.
All right, sweet.
All right, what kind of room we got here?
With about 3 inches from the tunnel, about 17 inches would work.
Yeah, that'll give us room. 17, we can run a runner over here and then come off of this cage over here for the other side. For our mounts. Yeah, that'll work.
It's all in the eyeballs.
You know, what's cool about working with your own design? There's no right or wrong way. But aluminum's not cheap, so design it in cardboard first, cut it out, and be sure you're happy with the design.
Something like that.
Yeah, I like that. That'll give us a nice gentle curve on the top. Right where that first break comes in is just about the time that that's going to be rounding off into your shoulder.
Now granted, this may be more time consuming than picking up the phone and ordering a set, but when they're done, you can take all the credit.
There you go, man. Put some duct tape on, a little bit of fire retardant, mount it in the car, we're good to go.
I guess I'll watch you go down the track first time.
What do you think about relief cutting it across here so we can actually move that forward so it'll like support your shoulders a little better? Think that'd work?
Yeah, a couple pie cuts and just roll that whole top forward.
With the cardboard version looking good, it's time to break it down and transfer it to the aluminum. Tommy's making the bends to match the shape of the seat bottom. Now once the angles are right, it's ready to get tacked together.
Hey man, what you doing?
Designing some headrests. Now I really like the look of a low back on the street, but I like the safety aspects of a high back on the track. So I figure we'll just build some and make them removable.
Cool, man. Do you think you could burn this thing together so I could cut out the other side?
Yeah, we can do that.
Sweet.
TIG welding, well, it's a lot more involved than MIG, but for aluminum, well, it's your best bet.
And that's why leaving a little overlap there isn't necessarily a bad thing. I didn't use any rod all the way down that.
Hey guys, welcome to Muscle Car. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done on an alter ego, so we rolled her back into the shop to see if we can throw some more metal at her. Now everything on this car has been one off, and the headers aren't going to be any different.
That's right. This is an AFX car, so we knew from day one we'd be using a lot of welding wire, cut-off wheels, and a whole bunch of creativity.
Now the headers need to be period correct, because they're a major part of the style on these cars, and that means a big old mess of tubes hanging out behind the front tire here. But it's also got to be street legal, so we're going to take the exhaust, run it all the way out the back, and use cutouts for the track.
There's not a lot of off-the-shelf options available when you're grafting a 4.6 Ford into a Mercury Comet AFX car. Even flanges are hard to find, but we found some at Dynatech.
When building headers completely from scratch, you already know where you're starting. You just need to establish where you're going to end up. One way to do this is to tack the collectors in place first. This also makes it easier to keep both sides symmetrical.
Most companies offer stubs for their flanges, and it's a good idea to order them longer than you need so you can trim them to fit. You also may be trimming a pinch weld here or there, but our Comet is used to being chopped up, so that's no big deal. If you're only building one set of headers, you can get by with a cutoff wheel or air saw, but a bandsaw will greatly speed up the process and give you straighter cuts. Those straight cuts really add up when you're butt welding 20 pieces of tubing together. We began with a big pile of mandrel bent header tubing from Hooker and just started eyeballing the bends to make our cuts. Now we've got to make sure this here header meets Dad's approval.
All right, son.
What do you think, Paul?
Good job, boy.
Normally we would TIG weld and metal finish these joints for appearance, but we're planning on having them coated. So we're going to save a little time and just MIG weld them up. Welding the seams you can get to while it's still mounted on the car ensures that it will keep its shape when removed. The rest can be welded while it's on the table. Since we want to be able to uncork these headers, we need to build some caps. There's a couple of ways to do this. Weld on a 3-bolt flange and build a cover for it, or you can build a cap with one center bolt. We think the center bolt looks cleaner and is easier to remove, so that's what we're going with. I'm using a lathe to cut out the disc for the caps, but a cutoff wheel or bandsaw and grinder will work too. And Rick will be showing you how that's done later in the show. To make things easier on myself, I'm bolting the cap down to the table before attaching a band that will form the lip. Since header leaks are nothing less than annoying, we're making gaskets out of Mylar heat screen from DEI to seal them up. Well, that'll cap it off to make it street legal, but I know what you're thinking. This is not gonna work. Where's the exhaust gonna go? Well, we're gonna cut a port somewhere in here to match up to the pipes running out back. But we're gonna wait till we get the headers back on the car so we can finish up the exhaust system.
Hey guys, welcome back. You know, it's no big secret that our Comet's going to be spending most of its life on the track. But hey, we still want to be able to hit the burger joints once in a while without Johnny Law coming down on us. And that means, yeah, we're going to have to run mufflers. Now, there's literally hundreds of different ones out there in the market. They range in price anywhere from $10 to $1,000. But since we've already hand-built 99% of this car, hey, we couldn't bring ourselves to pick up a phone and order a set now. So we're going to build our own. Now, these cutaways show 3 basic types of mufflers. Now, the baffle design uses sound wave cancellation to reduce noise. The blow-through design dates back to the earliest engines and absorbs sound but doesn't impede flow. These are also known as glass packs. And some mufflers like this one use a combination of baffling and sound absorption. Now, we want the Comet to sound like it looks, so we're going with the glass pack design. Now, the concept is pretty simple. A perforated inner core wrapped with a sound-absorbent material, all encased in an outer shell. Now, I'm using 2.5-inch pipe for our center because that's the same size as the rest of the exhaust is going to be. For sound absorption, I'm going to use a layer of steel wool wrapped up with a layer of fiberglass. Then I'll take all of that, shove it in a chunk of 4-inch pipe, and cap the ends. Now, this part of the process, it was bad enough with a drill press. Now, you could do it with a hand drill and a vise, but prepare yourself for a long day in the shop and some sore arms the next day. A free t-shirt to anyone that can tell me how many holes I just drilled. I'm using 14-gauge steel to build the end caps. Now, earlier Tommy used the lathe to cut out precise discs for the header caps, but I know most of you guys don't have a lathe. Now, another way to get the same result is a drill press and a hole saw. With the centers punched out, the pieces can be finished with a bandsaw or an air saw. Before assembling the mufflers, I'm grinding off the burrs left behind by the drill press. That way everything will slip together nice and easy. Cool, that all fits. Time to pack it. We're using plain old coarse steel wool for the inner layer. Just unroll it and wrap it around the core as evenly as possible. Next comes the fiberglass. We're going to use a double layer, a tight woven mat that'll help resist the heat. Cool. Almost there. Time to weld it up. And that's it. Now guys, I ain't gonna sit here and try to tell you that building your own mufflers is gonna save you time or money, because it's not. But if you like me and you like building stuff, go out there and build a set of mufflers, man, see what you come up with. Besides, it's one more piece on the car that you can point to and say, I built that. It's time to unplug this exhaust, and that means we need to decide where we're gonna knock a hole in these collectors. Now it's gonna have to be a pretty sharp angle here, which I know doesn't exactly maximize airflow. But the point here is to get this thing just legal enough that we can get it to the track. Then we'll uncork it and make some passes. All right, man, what do you think?
It can be turned this way.
Just keep a nice air gap in here so we're not burning the floorboards.
Right. We got plenty of room for hangers.
We're inboard of the rail?
Yeah, just it worked.
I think that'll work right there. Six.
Exhaust jacks will keep everything in place while we're laying it out. Temporary hangers will also help hold it together until the real ones are installed.
About there, about 10 inches. Yeah, shopmufflers.com has a lot of cool stuff, but they don't carry the Bacon Master 2000s. You're only gonna find these under Altered Ego. Now's a good time to hang all the sheet metal. Now the front suspension center line, we moved it forward by 6 inches, which is great for weight transfer. The downside of it, the wheels now aren't going to fit the wheel well openings in our fenders, so that means some cutting's going to happen. But before we can hang the fenders, we need to get these doors hung. None of these gaps need to be perfect at this point.
Yeah, that's race car good.
We just need a rough idea of how much fender we're going to have to lose. Oh yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, we need to be sure to cut off enough so that if this thing happens to come down hard on the nose, it doesn't get into the tire.
Yeah, it's the last thing I need is a flat.
Right, yeah.
That's what I think. Just maybe take this arc and just run it right off the front. I think that'd give us enough clearance.
I wouldn't be beyond just cutting it straight, you know, make it easy.
Let's get some tape laid out so it looks like.
Yeah, it's an idea. Yeah, I don't really like that one there. It kind of looks like we're just hacking the car up.
Yeah, a little bit. This top one up here doesn't really bother me. It sort of follows this body line up here. The only downside of it, we'd have to continue that body line all the way through to really make it look right.
Yeah, I think we ought to go ahead and go with that metal one there.
Yeah, I agree. That one there looks nice, huh? Has a nice shape to it. Plus it gives us the clearance.
Yeah. Guess we better get some saws.
Right on.
You'd think with all the hacking and chopping we've done on this car, we'd run out of stuff to cut. Nope. We found a few more square inches of stock sheet metal to modify. Altered Ego needs to keep a stiff upper lip, so I'm adding a strip of sheet metal to put some strength back into the fender. No fancy slip rollers here, just tweak it till it fits, then trim it and weld it in. Almost cut it.
Yeah, that's hanging out there a little bit, huh?
Yeah, this side over here needs to be back probably a good 4 or 5 inches easy. Yeah, to scoot it back, we'd still have to notch the front to move it back. Don't really want to do that.
Yeah, Advanced did an awful nice job on this thing to take a plasma to it, dude.
Yeah, it'd be a shame. I know where an old Falcon's sitting. We may be able to get it off there and cut it up.
That might work, actually. I think a Falcon has shorter ends on it, too.
And we just have to get it in here to see what it is, if it works.
All right. Oh, we got something for eBay then.
Well, I was in luck. The old Falcon hadn't been hauled off for scrap yet, and the bumper was still on it. Now, a Falcon and a Comet are basically the same car with a few small differences. One of the differences is the size of the bumper. It's a lot shorter here on the side to give us our clearance for our wheels. They both have built-in turn signals, so it's really not going to look all that different. And with it not having perfect chrome on it, I didn't mind notching it for the front frame rails. Let me show you what I did for front brackets. I fabbed up some brackets using some 1/8" plate. Made them removable just in case we ever need to get in here. Also took the bracket and formed it to the back of the bumper to give it a little added strength. And using the factory bolts retains that stock look. The factory brackets may be long gone, but mounting the bumper is a lot easier now. Just a few easy to reach bolts and it's done.
Right on, man. That'll give us all kinds of tire clearance.
Yeah, it looks pretty stock. I bet most people won't even know it come off of a Falcon instead of a Comet.
Yeah, I bet you're right. Well, now we got something up front to push the slower traffic out of the way, but we still need something on the sides to muffle the sounds of people screaming when they see this thing coming.
You're talking about windows, right?
Yeah, basically. You'll see. I've got the side windows from Altered Ego laid out here, but I'm not going to be reusing any of this original glass, because not only is this stuff heavy, but it can shatter on impact, and that is not something that you want in a race car. But there is a lighter weight, safer alternative. I made these out of Lexan. It's a lot lighter than glass, plus it won't shatter if it ever gets hit. And we're going to be driving Altered Ego on the street quite a bit, so I designed them so that you can take both sides out in under a minute. I want to keep an original look, and the best way to do that is to use as much of the original frames as I can. It may seem a little weird to use a hammer so close to the glass, but I'm being careful not to hit the glass. I'm just sliding it across to tap the metal loose. These vent windows aren't part of my plan, but the frames are, so I'm stripping them of all of the hardware. The quarter windows were easy to take apart, which means the Lexan should go in pretty easy as well. Since we moved the rear end forward 16 inches, our tubs are now sitting where the regulators used to be. So the quarter glass is going to be locked in place, and that means the rollers and regulator attachments can go. Next, I need to build a receptacle for the window frame to slide into. It's a basic piece that serves an important function. By using a factory mounting hole, it'll even be adjustable. Originally, this U-channel held the glass and helped to guide it as it moved. Its new job, with the help of these tabs, will be to stay in one place and support the bottom of the new window. With the new design, window felts are pretty much out of the question. But if it does get wet, well, there's really nothing left inside the doors to worry about anyway. I trimmed the window frame by about 3 inches, and I'm hammering a piece of round stock into the channel. It's going to slide into that adjustable receptacle that I've already bolted into the door. Using the cardboard template I made for the other side, I can make sure that everything lines up before I chop up any Lexan. There we go. Now we can finally start cutting some windows. I've got the biggest window traced out on the Lexan. Now this I got from Summit Racing, but give your local speed shop a call and they can probably track some down for you. Now forewarn you, this stuff isn't cheap, but don't try to chintz out and use plexiglass, because plexiglass, little break if anything hits it. Unlike Lexan, where you gotta work at it to break it. Now remember, when cutting Lexan, always use a blade with at least 10 teeth per inch. Now this should set right in place where the cardboard was. It should. There we go. Beautiful, but hey, this is only half the story, because at some point I'm going to want to open this dude up to get my burger and fries at the drive-in. Well, the old tried and true way of doing that is with the slider. Now take a look at the one that I made for the driver's side. Now this is a case where bigger isn't always better. So if you make them too long, it'll hit the stop before it opens up all the way. By making the window shorter, it actually opens up wider. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out, so I'm going to copy this design onto the other side. I'm starting by marking only the corners, then using masking tape to get the straight lines. That way, if there is any variance in my original cut, I won't transfer it onto the new piece. Next, after drilling some pilot holes, I grab the air saw and open it up. Using the piece I just cut out as a template, I'll trace around the edges, then use a combination of 1/4 and 1/8 inch tape to mark the shape of the new slider. This way, it'll be 3/4 of an inch larger than the hole. The protective paper needs to come off now so I can center the window over the opening. Just be careful, because Lexan, man, it scratches if you even look at it wrong. Well, now that I've got a window, I need a way to mount it, tight enough that it's not flopping in the breeze, but loose enough that it can still slide. That's where these strips come in. The first strip is the same thickness as the window and acts as a guide. The next one, it's aluminum, and it'll add just enough clearance to allow the slider to move. The top piece is the retainer, keeps the window from actually falling out. I've pre-drilled and countersunk the holes in the first layer of Lexan, so now I can use them as guides to drill the holes the rest of the way through. Doing it this way assures that the mounting screws will line up perfectly all the way through the layers. Lexan expands and contracts quite a bit, so don't over-tighten the mounting hardware or it may split when the sun heats it up. After buttoning up all 3 sides, it's time to drop it in place and see what we got. One last detail, a small strap of metal and a drilled and tapped hole will hold the front of the frame in place, but it's still easily removed. And when you look at this quarter window, you might think that it's still stock, but you saw me tear it apart and cut off the regulator mounts, so you know that it's not. Now the Lexan that's in there is the same thickness as the original glass, so it was a no-brainer to put it in. Then I just drilled a couple of holes, installed some rib nuts, made the whole thing bolt in. I accomplished everything that I set out to with these windows. They're lighter, they're safer, they're easily removable, they open for ventilation, and they just look cool. Now all I have to do is make some knobs to put on the inside, make them a little easier to open and close.
We've cut a lot of steel out of this guy, but there's still one area that could use some lightening up: the hood.
Now, drag racing is all about power to weight ratio, and it's a lot easier to shave weight than it is to gain horsepower. One of the ways to do that is by using lighter weight materials. So we're going to be losing the steel hood and replacing it with a fiberglass version. And just like most everything else on this car, we're going to build it ourselves.
When coming up with a hood design, we got to include a cutout for the intake stacks. These will be replaced with some taller ones that'll stick out of the hood. They'll look cool and increase low-end torque.
Now, when building fiberglass parts, you got to start with a mold first. Now, we're going to cast our mold right off the original hood. It's going to be a lot easier to modify the steel hood before we make the mold, rather than have to modify the fiberglass hood later. So that means we got some prep work to do. I transferred the measurements from the intake onto the hood and laid out exactly where I'm going to have to cut the hole. But I'm not going to chop it out yet because I want to keep this hood as rigid as possible while I build the mold off of it. Now we're also going to add a contoured lip all the way around the outside. That way this thing isn't going to end up looking like a stock hood that we just chopped a hole out of. This hood was sandblasted, then sealed up with epoxy primer. 80 grit will knock down the surface so the filler will stick. My design calls for deleting the factory trim, so I'll smooth off the contours left behind. Now what I'm building here is called the plug. It only has to last long enough to pull a mold from, so that means I don't have to burn all my time hand forming pieces and metal finishing. I'm using plastic filler, but really, and you could use anything from modeling clay to paper mache, just as long as it holds its shape long enough to make your mold. While the plug is disposable, keep in mind that the mold is going to have the exact same shape, so it does need to be straight. A little extra time spent here will save a lot of time prepping the final part for paint. With the majority of the hood flattened out, I can start building the lip. Now leaving the tape on up to this point means I already have a slight edge that'll act as a guide. I used a razor blade and cut a notch out of a plastic spreader. This should act just like a fun factory, except with Bondo instead of Play-Doh, so don't eat it. It's gonna take several coats to get what I'm after, shaping and sanding as I go. If you've always heard not to put filler on thicker than a dime, you can forget it when you're building a plug. Pack it in till it's full. Just make sure to spread it in several thin layers to avoid heat buildup. I still got a lot of sanding to do, but once I finish smoothing this all out, I'll get it primed and painted, just like any other body panel. And I know this thing looks a whole lot different than the last time you saw it. You might be asking yourself, why on earth do you have to finish this thing out this perfect just to use it for a plug? Well, the answer is, this looks exactly how the finished product is going to look. So if there's any flaws in this, you're going to have the same exact flaw in your final hood. At this stage, we need to get this thing all sealed up with wax. That way we can put the part all on it, get our mold off of it. I'm using a wax specifically designed for plugs that'll seal up any pores in the surface. The application is the same as any other wax. It's just a little thicker than the stuff you use on your car, so it is harder to polish off. All right, just have to do this 2 more times for a total of 3 coats, and we can move back into the booth. Next comes the release film. It's water-based and goes on using conventional spray equipment. It does just what the name says. It creates a film that'll help the mold release from the plug. Now don't lay it on too heavy or it will fisheye. Build it up in 4 or 5 light coats. Tooling gel is a gel coat designed to withstand numerous heat cycles, so it's ideal for molds. Now it does spray like spackle, so use a primer gun with the biggest fluid tip you've got. 3 coats will get the thickness I need. After about an hour, I finally get to stick down some glass. Now this is standard 2-ounce mat, and I'm using a tooling resin for the mold. It's more stable than production resin, it won't shrink or move. What this does is works all the air bubbles out and pushes the mat and the resin down into that gel coat. Now make sure to keep the roller clean by dipping it in lacquer thinner now and then, or it'll start to grab the mat and tear it up. And that's it. That is the first of 4 layers that I need to put down on this thing. I'll tell you what, this thing's looking good. Now at this point we have all the fiberglass laid down and I've got some bracing put on there. Now the bracing, I just used some old plywood because as I said earlier, this stuff wants to shrink and move as it cures. This will help keep it in position. Now we're ready to pop this thing apart and see what our mold is going to look like. That snap is up coming apart. Ha! Well guys, good news. The hardest part here is done. We've got our plug done and our mold is now almost ready to rock. All I have to do is get it cleaned up, get the parting film off, wax it, then we can start building our actual hood. We're ready to lay down the gel coat. It's going to form the actual face of our brand new hood. This is standard gel coat, and unlike the tooling gel I used on the mold, it's not designed to withstand numerous heat cycles. It's for making a single part, but it is a lot cheaper. This is the same 2-ounce mat I used for the mold. I'm building up 2 layers, allowing it to dry in between. A street hood would normally be 3 or 4 layers thick, but we're trying to keep it as light as possible. I'll go back and add an aluminum reinforcement later. Now, a lot of the time when you're building fiberglass parts, a part number tag goes underneath the final layer of fiberglass. That way, as it's going through the production and being warehoused and shipped out and all kind of stuff, you know the part number. Well, this thing is a one-off muscle car piece, so we need to tag it. Perfect. One of a kind, baby. One of a kind. All right, man. Moment of truth. Ooh, there it goes.
Not too bad.
There's our new Comet hood. All we got to do is trim off the edges, set it back on the car. Hopefully it fits. Sand down the edges, square it up a little bit. We'll see if it fits. Now the main reason why you use fiberglass in the car is to save weight. So just out of curiosity, let's see how much weight we're really going to be saving by using a fiberglass instead of our steel part.
All right, Doughboy plus hood, 258.
Got it?
You can set it over there. It's heavy. I bet this new one, yeah, it's quite a bit lighter. Let's try this one on. No, we're at 220. Man, that's quite a bit lighter.
So 38 pounds?
Yeah, imagine if you'd lost some weight. See if it fits.
Probably make this dude faster. Still got to build some stanchions and pins, but see how it looks.
And a little trimming, that thing be in good shape.
That looks pretty darn good.
That's one step closer to driving this thing, man. I can't hardly wait.
Oh, heck yeah.
I'll try my hand at that torque arm. We'll be in business. Hey, welcome back. The Comet's getting down to the last few final details before it gets bodywork and paint. One of those details is the torque arms. You might know them as torque bars or traction bars, but either way, they all do the same thing, help reduce axle wrap. So what exactly is axle wrap anyways? Well, when you get on the gas, the wheels are trying to push the car forward, and because of Newton's law, the axle housing wants to twist in the opposite direction, causing the leaf springs to flex in a way they're not intended to. The torque arm braces the rear axle to the frame rail, preventing that twisting motion. When planning our design, I need to make sure to clear the exhaust and the driver's side shock, so we'll run them close to the drive shaft. I need a place to mount the front shackle, so I'm going to tie into the existing floor braces with a piece of tubing right across here. I'm measuring 8 inches out from the frame rails to mark where the first bar will go. 1-inch square tubing will form these braces, with one on each side of the drive shaft. I made the rear mounts by notching some 2x3 box tubing to fit the rear end housing. It needs to be square and level, so I'll check it before and after I tack it in. I plan to make the arm 5 inches tall at the rear, so I'll measure up and mark where the top mounting point will be. These don't have to be any particular length, so I'll just mark the first arm where it looks good. With the bar clamped in place at the rear, I can check the drop for my 5-inch shackle and make sure it's level. I'm building ladder-style arms out of 1.25" DOM tubing. This design is not only strong, but it's going to look cool hanging up under the car. I borrowed Extreme's tubing bender to make this piece, but if you want, you could use a piece of straight. It just won't have the same style. Since all my pieces are already cut, I can go ahead and burn them all together. This is my first time using our new Miller welding table, and I gotta say, it's definitely a valuable tool to have in the shop. When you're fitting together a whole bunch of pieces, the adjustable clamps keep everything right where you want it. Since shackle mounts will hold the front in place, a sleeve for the bushing goes on next. For added strength, a plate goes on each side of the arm. These will also dress up the joint for a more finished look. After a few minutes to cool, it's ready for the shackle mount. All that's left is to mount it. I'm setting the angle at 0 to make it easier to duplicate when I make the other arm. With the finished welding done, I can line up the rear mount for a couple of 3/8 bolts.
Hey, right on, boss. That looks good. How to keep that rear end from doing flip-flops.
Yeah, they don't look too bad. Plus, man, they'll make you look like you mean business.
Yeah, I dig it, but what about the other side over here?
The body work on our AFX car, Altered Ego, is all done. Today we're going to take care of a few final details like the gauges, clutch, and pedal assembly, and then slide in the power plant.
This entire project has been about building a drag car the old-fashioned way, obviously with one exception. We're going to be using a Ford fuel-injected 4.6 mod motor. This thing put down almost 500 horse on our dyno, but to hold on to that old-school vibe, these stacks are going to have to head north, all the way through the hood.
When it comes to underappreciated components, one of the most overlooked and important parts of your setup are the foot controls. Your life literally lays in their engineering and installation. This Tilton racing style pedal assembly has a built-in mounting bracket for the master cylinders. We also picked up a universal floor mount gas pedal. This entire setup came from Summit. Once mounted, we'll be able to control our horsepower and our stopping power. Our 2-pedal setup uses 3 master cylinders, 1 for the clutch and 2 for the brake. Since they're all the same size, I'm only putting 1 in place for mock-up. This assembly doesn't come with mounts, so it's time to come up with a game plan. I fabbed up some mounting tabs using some 1/8" plate. The one on the driver's side is going to be made from 2 pieces, since my brake isn't strong enough to bend this heavy steel. Our sheet metal brake, like most auto shop brakes, is designed to bend up to 16 gauge, so any thicker has to be done in 2 pieces and welded together. The pedal assembly needs to be mounted directly to the roll cage so it can be as solid as possible. I'm welding the left side bracket directly to the cage, but the right requires an extra piece of DOM tubing. All of these mounts will be welded solid, but the pedal assembly will be bolted to these brackets so it can be removed for maintenance. All right, the mount is solid and there's no interference. I could go ahead and mount the reservoirs and master cylinders, but there's really no need until you're ready to bleed the brakes. So I'll leave them out and give us some extra room when we're mounting the gauges. As for the clutch, well, we need a transmission. So I'm done for now.
Hey man, I got this gas pedal ready to go in. You want to take a break?
Shoot, yeah, by all means, I'm out.
Right on. The nice thing about universal parts like this pedal is you can mount it however you want. For comfort, we're putting ours at an angle so we can mash it to the floor easier. I pre-built a mounting pad that'll be welded to the floor. The pedal will bolt to the plate and can be easily removed. For now, I'm just mocking up the pedal. When we put it in for real, I'll use lock nuts so it doesn't go anywhere. Cool. Now, while most modern engines use a computer-controlled drive-by-wire accelerator, the fuel injection that's been installed on our 4.6 uses a traditional cable-type accelerator. Now, once we get the engine installed, we can measure it out for the cable.
It's finally time to drop the heart into our wheel-standing beast. We chose this modern Ford 4.6 because it can pack a lot of power in a lightweight package, but still can be built to have that retro look we're after.
Now, these motors are capable of up to 2,000 horsepower, but Altered Ego was built to reflect a time when numbers like that were almost unheard of, so we kept ours at just under 500. Anything more than that would require a stronger, more modern chassis, and that just wouldn't work with our nostalgic theme. This is the first time we've tried to drop the real engine and transmission into this car, and let me tell you, faux mock-ups are a lot lighter and easier to handle.
Okay, we're gonna have to go kind of in and up, or in and down. Okay, swing it back.
Hold it, hold it.
Hey, Tom, tell you what, let's just cut this out, dude.
Yeah, it's cool.
It'll save us a lot of hassle.
Yeah, they used to do that to them Tri-5 Chevys all the time.
Yep, exactly.
is your rache. From the factory, the core support was a structural part of the car, but our Comet is a long way from the factory, and all of our bracing more than makes up for what I'm cutting out. Just when you thought we were done chopping this thing up.
Can we come on down with it? Yeah, pull it in. It'd probably go right there. Sure. With the motor mounts lined up, the transmission mount should drop right in.
Our hand-fabbed headers look better than ever with their NitroPlate coating. The piece I cut out earlier will be easier to remove next time. I attached mounting tabs on the centerpiece and welded nuts to the back side of the core support, so the whole thing unbolts with 4 Allens.
We knew our stacks would be too short, and now's a good time to see how much more height we're going to need. Careful, don't scratch the paint job. Yeah, these things are lacking a little bit in length side. Say probably about right there.
Yeah, Wayne over at Very Cool Parts, he built these originally. So if we get a hold of him, I'm sure he'd hook us up with another set.
Cool, I'll give him a buzz, see what he can do, and I'll go ahead and get these off.
All right, cool. I'll get the exhaust put on and get started on the dash.
Sounds good.
Now, you guys have seen NitroPlate ceramic coating on a lot of parts that we've used around here, including the headers that we just bolted onto Altered Ego. But this is the first time we've ever used their black coating. It's tough, resists rust, increases airflow, and reduces radiant heat, just like their aluminized coating. Main difference is, this is a lot more subtle. One reason you may choose the black over the aluminum is the black is rated at 1700 degrees, where the aluminum is rated at 1300. Now this makes it ideal for turbo and supercharged applications. We chose it because we just think it looks cool. Altered Ego's chassis is just about done. And man, she's looking good. Hey guys, welcome back to Muscle Car. In 1964, a lot of cars like ours came straight from the factory with a full set of gauges. Now they may have looked cool, but they weren't always accurate. Well, technology has come a long way since the 60s, and nowadays, thanks to companies like Stewart Warner, you can get a classic-looking gauge with modern internals. The first thing I need to do is make sure the gauges are actually going to fit. Well, looks like we're in luck, so I'll start transferring my measurements to a template.
I want to make this as wide as I can. Our gauge is about 3.5 inches. So it's going to be a fairly tight fit in here anyway. So if I can get the back part of this about 4 1/4, that'll give us about 3/4 of an inch, which is 3/8 of an inch on top and bottom to the bezel. So that'll give us enough room. 4 1/4. And that will give us the flat piece for the gauges to actually set it to.
Using a sheet metal brick on cardboard may seem like overkill, but it gives the precise bends I need for an accurate template. The closer the mock-up piece is, the better the final piece will fit. From here, it's a lot of trimming and fitting. Make small changes until it drops into place. Then you're ready to transfer the template onto some steel. I'm using 18 gauge. It's easy to hand trim, and there's really no reason to use anything thicker for a non-structural part. A brake can't bend opposing angles, so I split the design into 3 pieces that'll be welded together after the bends are made.
Just take this a little bit at a time.
Now, just like I did with the cardboard, I'll make small changes and test fit as I go.
And I want to build something to fill in these edges.
I could tack weld this from the back side and keep the front clean, but I think the welds match the raw, hand-built look of the car, so I'm leaving them. After making sure it all fits, I can trim the edges and mount the gauges. To make sure the gauges are spaced properly and level, I'll mark the center line of the panel and use that as a guide. From there, I can set them in place and find an arrangement that not only looks good, but will allow the mounting brackets to clear one another on the back. Now, once I have a layout that works, I'll mark the positions and start cutting some holes. I have a hole saw the correct size for the small ones, so these are easy. The big ones, that's another story. To cut them out, I'll start by drilling a pilot hole, then finish the job with an air saw. Time to see what all my hard work has brought me. Yeah, now that looks nice. I'm not going to clamp it all in place yet because I still have to paint the panel. But once we get the harnesses installed for the body and the engine, then we can use the wiring and the sending units for the gauges, get everything hooked up and finish out the install. So for now, we're done.
Earlier in the show, we talked about swapping out our velocity stacks for some taller ones that would stick through the hood. They not only look better, they'll increase low-end torque. And since it's got the same flange as the other, we can go ahead and bolt them on, see how they look. These 9-inchers came from the same guys who made the 4-inchers, verycoolparts.com. They specialize in fuel injection stacks and intakes for just about any setup.
About got it?
Oh yeah, we're good.
Let's see how this dude looks.
And I think it's gonna be a little tight, but I think it'll work, especially since we're gonna use pins instead of the hinges.
Yeah, we don't need no stinking hinges. Oh, dude, that looks sick right there.
Oh yeah.
The exhaust, the stance, the big and littles on the Hyland brands, the in-your-face roll cage. Dude, this thing screams AFX.
Yeah, but man, it's far from done.
Yeah, I think what it needs now is a little blue candy over some flake and maybe some white pearl. That'd look nice.
Getting the Comet ready for a splash of color and a bunch of shine has been one long road. But by the end of the day, this thing's gonna look better than $1 million. And we got a surprise guest today. That's a good friend of mine. It's got some pretty cool history.
I'm Gary Miser. I do automotive illustration, I do custom painting and pinstriping, and I do graphic art for people for t-shirts. My hero is Ed Roth, and I love the Rat Fiend character and the monsters and the cars. And I met Ed Roth in 1988. He goes, "Have you ever drawn Rat Fiend?" And I says, "Have I ever drawn Rat Fiend?" I says, "I've been drawn since 9 years old." And then that's when I started doing the Rat Fiend art for him until he passed away in 2001. I'm a self-taught artist. I never had anybody really to teach me because nobody wanted to give away their trade secrets. So I just picked up a brush, and that's what started it all.
And Gary's not here just for audio input either. Before this paint job's done, he's gonna have a brush in his hand. Now these paint jobs are known for bright colors and graphics that run from one panel to the next. So before we lay anything out, we need to get everything lined up.
She's gonna be a wheel standard with a cutting edge mod motor, but the Comet will also sport a 60s drag racing exterior, right down to some Mr. Gasket hood pins. Not a whole lot putting in a set of hood pins. All it needs is a hole, tighten up to 2 jam nuts, you're good to go.
Looks like we may have some floppage back here on the tail end, but I wanted to put something across this cowl to kind of keep it stiff anyways.
You must just build like a bridge for it, so you mount this into it.
After marking where the pins go, I'll punch a few holes in the hood, and we should be all set. If it's off, you get to fill the holes.
It's time to bring Gary in so we can get our game plan together, what this thing's gonna look like.
Well, I've been studying the cars, so I've been looking at it. I've been thinking, well, what are we gonna do with this? Yeah. And I see candy fades. and I see pinstriping.
What would plant this in the area that we're going for is basic panel painting with the fades on it. I don't know if we do like a silver inset and then fade it in, or just forget the flake and just stick with the heavier pearls. Or
Flake is hard to do, especially if you're wanting to do the big boat flake.
yeah,
It's a lot of time involved.
Well, the big boat flake is what I really want to do.
Yeah,
on this
it
thing.
looks good.
These things scream flake, whether it's in the lettering of it or a graphic or something. I mean, I just really believe that it should have some flake on it.
I know on a lot of the old gassers, they made it look like a rocket in here.
So we're gonna do
A lot of work.
a lot of work. Then we'll mask off the panels, do the blue candy on it, pinstripe, do the Altered Ego logos, and it'll look awesome.
Sure will.
All right, to bring you guys up to speed, we got all our body panels mounted and adjusted, the body final sanded. Now we're ready to hose on some sealer.
But first we gotta get this dude masked up. That means covering up everything that we don't want to get paint on.
A poor masking job can lead to a ton of extra work when you have to either remove the overspray or repaint the surface you didn't want painted in the first place. A nice paint job starts right here.
All right, time to put the sealer down. I'm laying down a DP50, which is a gray sealer. This will reduce the coats of silver that I have to lay on it, and the less coats at this point, the better, because there's gonna be a lot of material going on this car. Metallic paint will really highlight any imperfections in your surface, so the sealer needs to be as smooth as glass. As I said earlier, we are gonna flake this car, but it's not quite ready yet. So we're gonna lay down a silver for a background, because the silver is gonna help us fill in with the flake a lot easier, so we don't have to put down quite as much. We're using what's known as a flake buster to apply the big metal flakes to Altered Ego. I'm also mixing in some small flakes to the first coat of clear to add another layer of sparkle. We're ready to rock. The clear goes on first, acting as an adhesive for the big flakes I'll be firing at it. Then while it's still wet, I hit it with the flake buster. Now, Brian at Auto Body Color and Supply came through for us with the metal flakes, along with all the materials we're throwing at Altered Ego today.
This thing is swimming in flakes. Some people would be happy with this, but we ain't done yet. Another layer of clear will lock in the sparkle. And let us get to work knocking down the rough edges. But the DA won't get in all the nooks and crannies. Whose idea was it to flake this? I just really believe that it should have some flake on it. Okay, what we're trying to do is re-level the surface. The flake is actually poking through, which you'll be able to see it in the candy. So we've got to get all this leveled back down so we can start that next process. Luckily, Gary's not afraid to pick up a piece of sandpaper and get his butt to work.
So what are we there, 49? Okay, right there. What we're doing here is measuring the letter to find the center of it, because we're getting ready to spray the candy on the door from here to here, right? We're gonna fade candy gold in here for the altered letters, and then we're gonna go in here and do this solid green candy on Ego.
So what do you think it's gonna look like?
It's gonna look good.
Yeah?
Yes, sir, it's gonna have glow.
You can see we got clear over the candy. It's not looking like a whole lot yet, but this is the base colors for what will eventually be the Altered Ego logo. Now is the fun part. We actually get to start laying out the graphics. Looks like Gary's already got a head start on me here.
A lot of guys will take and just do a little bit at a time. You wanna steer this tape with a length on it so you'll have a good straight line.
So I shouldn't be doing it like this?
No, Rick.
Really?
I don't think that's what you want.
How far is that, dude? The layout stuff right here and the brainstorming that we're doing, that's what makes this car look like what it's gonna look like. The spraying is just spraying. It's the taping, it's the layout that really dictates the overall feel of the car.
Now you're just gonna pinstripe the outside edge?
I wanted to leave this part right here in the trunk lid open
for doing like sponsorship name or something.
This is a good chance to bounce ideas off of Gary.
I'm thinking kind of run the fade all the way around.
Yeah, I think you're right. That would finish that detail. That would kind of give this a little shape to it. Being white, baby blue around that, yeah, that really looked good.
If you look, I'm actually laying this line just on the outside of the roll of the body line. And that makes it a lot easier to come back later with a pinstripe and lay a stripe down over the top. If you put it right on that edge, then your brush is always wanting to walk off the sides as you're trying to pull a line. So bring it up onto your flat surface just a little bit, and when you pinstripe, you can go over the top of the line that's on a more flat surface. Makes it a lot easier to stripe it.
And what we're doing is smoothing this out to lay the lettering down. And then after I get it all smoothed out and laid down, I'll have a transfer paper where I can pencil out the lettering for each letter, and then I've got to come back and hand cut each one of the letters out. And when we peel that back, the lettering will just be masked on there, and we can shoot the white, and we'll be ready to roll.
Now, time to live up to my nickname, the Arsonist. It looks a little confusing, but it's really not if you look at it. You just have to pay attention to positive and negative space. This look right here that I pulled up is actually going to be kind of weaving through there almost like a snake, down underneath and back over and back down underneath and come back up and around. It's going to make it just a completely three-dimensional, especially when all the drop shadows and stuff go in over the top of the flake with the candy. This is going to be hot. To make a mirror image of the flames, I use a pants wheel and dust carbon onto the opposite side to make my pattern. I like doing it this way because any slight variation in symmetry is going to be easily seen. Now, once it's all masked up, Alter Ego is finally ready for some color. I'm fading multiple layers of blue candy onto the edges that we taped off. It gets more vibrant with each coat. And before long, boom goes the dynamite. Well, guys, we got all the candy down. Kind of get an idea of what the overall design here is going to look like. And stay tuned, because once we get all this thing unmasked, we get to remask it. Yay.
Looking like a drag car now.
You know, right now, the flames look kind of two-dimensional. But just wait till we get them all shadowed and pinstriped and buried into the clear, and they're gonna look like they're about 10 miles deep. All right, now I need to reverse the mask and cover up all the blue that we just laid down. That's really good to know your materials, because things may not be happy underneath other things. A good example of this is candy. Candies will bleed through just about anything that you put on over the top of it. So that's why we did all the flake first and then laid down all the candy. Now we're going to mask the candy off to lay down the white. If we tried to put white over the top of this blue, it would bleed through and we would have a whole bunch of really ugly baby blue bled through white, which is not cool. We're using a 1684 toner on this car, which is a pure white with no added colors. The outright flatness is definitely old school. For this mid coat, I'm going to bust out some pearl. It'll keep the look authentic and give it a little bit of extra pop as well. And it's time for the big reveal, but we're not done yet. Now it's time to do the drop shadows on the flames and kind of break up this massive silver a little bit. So I'm not going to be spraying a lot out of the airbrush, but I don't want to do that overspray to get on my white. So I'm just going to do a quick mask over that. The shadowing adds a lot of depth to the fire, giving it a more three-dimensional appearance. One more coat of clear really brings out the shine and helps all that flake come alive. Well, guys, we're all done in the booth. It's time to lay down some lines. Now, pay attention to Gary over there, because that dude's been striping for about as long as I've been alive, and he just may learn you something.
It's all right to make mistakes. Don't worry about it, because believe me, I've made mistakes all through the years, and I've been doing this 35 years. So get out there and get you a brush and start doing it.
We're coming into the home stretch now. All of the brushed on graphics go on as the final touch. Now, Gary's got this 60s style lettering down. It's a real trip to watch. He's also dreamed up a few custom logos for us. And of course, he's doing them all by hand. Now, this is what it looks like to watch a true master at work. Leonardo who? I'm working on pulling lines all over the place. A lot of these cars had miles of stripe on them. We thought a few of our friends deserved a mention too. And these guys helped bring this whole thing together. Hey, we couldn't have built this car without them. Oh man, take a look. After some fitting, sanding, sealer, base, little flake, big flake, clear, sanding again, candy, more base, mid-coat with pearl, airbrushing, more clear, pinstriping, outlining, logoing, and sign painting, this is what we've got.
Gary's adding a personal touch with a couple of custom logos for me and Rick. Man, I wish I could paint like that.
If you guys have any questions about anything you saw on the show today, or if you just want to see some more of Gary's work, hop on over to PowerBlockTV.com and check it out.
Yeah, and big thanks to Gary for showing us how they did it back in the day.
No problem, bro.
Well, guys, this has been a fun project, but we're out of time. So until next time, we're out of here.